All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to begin. Of course, tonight's class, we're only going to be 30 minutes. So I figure we could probably get 3 chapters tonight, I think. So that's what I'll shoot for. But no, honestly, I think my goal is if we can get through chapter 40, it's a really great chapter. Really, some really good news after 39 chapters of just a lot of judgment and these things. It's kind of like I heard somebody say that, one of the 39 is God is a little meaner there, then he becomes a Christian in chapters 40 on. But it's a whole different feel in 40 already. We'll see it. By the way, what are some of your impressions, just quickly, of 1 through 39? What are some things that stuck out to you in Isaiah? What are you, Danny?
I think one of the biggest things is just the fact that what is hinted about, the things after, this king that have come, things like that. But you just keep getting these examples of stuff that it's not.
Just glimpses, yeah.
But it's not anybody you see right now.
Yeah. It's teased, buddy.
The patience that God has.
That's incredible. Yeah.
It reminds me of that everything will happen in His time.
Yeah. Well, and also there's a saying I heard somebody say, God is never late, but he's always on time. And yeah, incredible. And we'll see that even more tonight, just the incredible patience of God. And the idea that, you get the idea in these first 39 chapters that God is this mean God and he just judgment and things like that. That's not at all how he is. That's the last thing that he wants to do. Any other thoughts about what you saw in Isaiah 1 to 39? A memorable thing. Okay, get that. Somebody's calling in. All right.
I will say that the sovereignty of God comes out over and over.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe you see things in the world that are happening and kind of seems helpless sometimes, and then you realize it look like Isaiah or Daniel or something like that, where it's like, God's always in control.
Yeah. That is a huge thing. It really stuck out to me too. He's in control, and still is. Remember, we'll go through quickly to the outline. Can anybody do the outline? If somebody to ask you, how is Isaiah laid out? Can anybody kind of give a rough sketch of how Isaiah is laid out? Anybody remember that? It's been a while since we talked about that. Very good, Darlene. Yeah. 1 through 6, the problems. And one way to remember, it sticks out in my mind, is a donkey and a what? An ox. And 1 through 5 is the first chapter, a donkey and an ox. And what are the characteristics of a donkey and an ox? Stubborn, yeah. And dumb. And that's how God describes his people. But chapter 6, as Darlene said, is a solution. And if the people of Israel would have the same reaction to God that Isaiah did, they wouldn't have their problems that they did. And they could go on being his people, and they wouldn't be taken into captivity. But they didn't, regardless of the persuasion that God tried to give them. And then chapters 7 through 39, what's that all about? Trust, yeah. And then specifically 7 through 12, that's a lesson in trust. And who is centered around that section there? Ahaz. And what was his problem?
He didn't trust God.
He didn't trust God. And what did he do? He chose to trust Assyria rather than God. Isaiah gave him that choice. God will give you anything he wants. And he says, no. And so because of that, then 13 through 39 are lessons in trust, why you should trust God. And Danny made that nice PowerPoint about that, wealth, money, leaders, people, all those kind of things. You can't trust in any of them. God is the only one to trust. And we'll see that continuing here. So now 40 to 56, they are in exile, okay? So we're going to shoot, 130 years into the future now. Isaiah is talking now. The people are in exile. And so these words I can see being of great encouragement to these people. I don't know Can any of you imagine what that might be like? As if, say, like us, and it could happen today. God could make it happen. Is if China took over our country. Okay, they invaded us, subdued us, and then they took us off and farmed us out all throughout China. You know, that'd be a pretty horrific thing. But that is exactly what happened to them. They were there, and I hope that never happens, but that could. I mean, that's what God uses other nations. And we'd say, well, like Habakkuk, you know, like, God, why would you have China judge us like that? They're more wicked than we are. And God, as God told Habakkuk, when Habakkuk said, why are you having the Babylonians? They're more wicked than we are. And God says, I know that, but this is the point. What did he tell Habakkuk? What was his answer to that when Habakkuk was appalled that a Babylonian was going to be the ones that come in and take over the people and things like that, and they're more wicked than we are? What did God tell him to do? He said, what? It's a very famous passage quoted throughout the New Testament. The just shall live, and that's all through Isaiah, the same thing. It's like, don't worry about what's happening around you. And then now it's the same thing. Don't worry about what's happening, no matter what's going down in your life. Put your trust in God. That's what he's trying to tell us in Isaiah, is trust him regardless of anything. He'll never fail us. He'll never fail us, regardless of what it seems like. All right, and then, so 40 to 50, that's like 55, that is, they're in exile. And then 56 to 66, they come back from exile. There's some messages for them in that. But really and truly, it does address them in 40 to 66, them in ways, but mostly it's to us. It's mostly to those in the kingdom. When Jesus came, from then on, that's who these words are talking about. And it's so encouraging to see some of the things that we're going to see tonight. Let's see. So what I want you to imagine, come back to where we're at, where Hezekiah, and you have the Assyrian army surrounding the city, okay? And you know, probably arguably the greatest army up to that time that had ever been, the most powerful, the most organized, and the most, you know, all these different divisions that they had in an organization, they were extremely powerful, and they were terrorists at the same time. And so imagine looking down from the walls and seeing that almost 200,000 soldiers around there just aching to get at you. And so you look down, and what do you see? Let's see what we got here. Look at that. They are. I knew that would throw you there, but that's our new little child that we have in our house. We got him Saturday, but they are. But let me tell you, those miniature schnauzers, they are terrible, but very scary. But anyway, I did a thing I'd never done before. Messed around with it. I went to AI and asked to generate what it would look like to the people of the Assyrian army surrounding, and this is what they came up with. It took several tries. Even in some of the things like that, they'd have that you'd be overlooking the city of Jerusalem, and you see the dome of the Islamic dome in there, and these often just there's a crane, you know, along with all these soldiers and stuff like that. And I go, how did it do that? But this here, that was one thing. Another one that came up with, I didn't like this one as much. It didn't turn out very good. It's not very clear. This the Assyrians on, I guess if you, this button here, Danny, yeah. The Syrians on one side and then the wall on the other. I don't know how to make this work, Danny. When you hold it down.
You want a pointer or you want
just a pointer, yeah.
Double click.
Double click.
And then just hold it down.
And then just hold it down. Okay. But it didn't make sense to me, a lot of the stuff that they had in that looked like a ship's thing or something right there. But anyway, that wasn't. It's clear to me. But anyway, on the just to see where we're at in history, I don't know if this is another AI thing. I asked to make a chart of the kings of Assyria and the kings of Judah as they worked out. And this is from roughly 720 BC to 580 for both accounts. And you can see what we're going to, the next person we're going to see is Hezekiah, and then Manasseh, his son, becomes king. And he reigns for 55 years or something like that. And does anybody remember anything about Manasseh?
He was super bad.
Once you got to know him, though, yeah, he was the worst, one of the worst kings they ever had. But what was the interesting thing about Manasseh? He repented. And see, that to me, horrific things, child sacrifice. He did the worst things, and God said that because of that was one big reason why the Babylonians were going to come. But he was taken off by the Assyrians, that he was taken and held prisoner. And when he was in jail, in prison, he prayed to God that he would forgive him. And this was towards the end of his reign, and God did. This is amazing. And he came back, and he actually tried to change things. And I bet he might have come out okay. But too little, way too little, too late. And then Ammon, and then Josiah was the next good king that came along. And then during this time, well, Sargon is Sennacherib's the king that we're in now. And then I don't think it was his son, but Esarhaddon, he became king, and he was very powerful, and he actually conquered Egypt. And but he only reigned for a short while, because after he conquered Egypt, he went back and they rebelled again. He came back and he died. And then this guy, Ashurbanipal, that's one of the most famous ones. He's the one that was a real knowledge geek, and he collected whatever he could, literature from all over the world, and put it in this library. And they wrote a lot, had this scribes would write a lot of things. And there's just thousands upon thousands of, in the cuneiform or whatever, that they're still working on. I don't think they've hardly touched how many there are. And we've got a wealth of knowledge from what he collected there. And that's the one where, was it 1849, there was some English guy that knew that there was a mound there. He knew there was something there, and he got money and went over there, and as soon as he started digging, they found, they looked out and they found this underground library, this vast library. And then you see all these in the British Museum and other places. And it was amazing, the big horses that you see, those kind of statues. They figured out how to haul them out of there. It was quite a feat. These guys were pretty amazing back then at that time. But at any rate, so then, but then that's when they began to fall. And you see that he was the last great king, and then the rest of these guys were not very powerful, and they fell. And it's in 609, and you can see. Let's see, that's when Josiah was king. He reigned till 609. And remember what happened to Josiah? He was killed, and who killed him? Remember who killed him? No, that was another king. That was another king. But he was killed, and it was because Nebuchadnezzar at that time, does anybody remember this history on that? I thought it was real interesting. Nebuchadnezzar, he was now coming into power, and he was a general, okay? And what he had done is there's a battle at Carchemish, that's up north of Israel, in 609. There's a battle up there. And so Egypt was going up to fight them there, to meet them there. And so Josiah found out about it, and for some reason, he went out to intercept the king of Egypt. And the king of Egypt's like, what are you doing, Josiah? Did he say something like God is having on this mission or whatever? But he ends up getting killed, okay? And so Egypt goes up, and they actually defeat Nebuchadnezzar at 609, okay, at Carchemish. So, and when Egypt comes back down, that's when they put Zedekiah, whoever that Jehoiakim, he put Jehoahaz. I think the Pharaoh put Jehoahaz on the throne at that time, and then Israel became a vassal of Egypt. Well, then in 605, Nebuchadnezzar regroups and gets everything back together, comes back, and they fight again at Carchemish. But this time he defeats him. And so Nebuchadnezzar comes on down into Israel, and he puts Jehoiakim or something in king, and he goes down to Egypt, and he's gonna defeat Egypt down there. But anybody remember what happened? When he's starting to go into Egypt, something happened. Nebuchadnezzar's still a general.
Sick or something?
Yes, his father died. Okay. And so Nebuchadnezzar then went back, and that's in 605. And as he's going back, he stopped in Jerusalem. And what he did is he picked up Daniel and some other people to take back to show like spoils of the war is what he did. So that was the first exiles taken back then. And Daniel, I mean not Daniel, but it was Daniel. was one of those. And then there's another one, and there's 3 total, 587, the last one, I think 599, 598 or something, 3 times that people got taken. But anyway, so that's where we're at. We're at the end of this now in chapter 40. They are in exile in Babylon. So let's see what. This is a modern day thing. This here is Lachish, and I'm just going to show you that real quick. This was a city that Sennacherib was besieging. And when he sent Rabshakeh and all them to Hezekiah, he sent those while he was here, while Sennacherib was here besieging the city. And so, and I just thought I'd show you this here. They say that there's like 3 million stones that the Assyrian army pulled out of, there's wadis or rivers like or banks around it, and they pulled them and threw them down to build this ramp up to the city because it was a very fortified city. They said the walls, they were like 18 feet thick, things like that. And they said they did it like, I don't know how they knew, but like 24 hours a day. It took 3 weeks or something like that to just pile enough of the stone and all that stuff up so they could get their siege machines. Let's see if I got another one up there. Yeah, to get these siege machines here, they get the reps, they get them up, and inside there were a lot of times soldiers and things like that, and they were covered to protect them. And I think what's kind of funny about this, what's going on here, is you see Israel is throwing, these are torches they're throwing down, and rocks and things like that. And then you see right here, the Assyrians were well versed in this. That was the guy, when they throw the torches down to start their thing on fire, they're pouring water on the fire. And that's what that is in that picture there. I thought that was hilarious. And then they show, it looks like there's people trying to escape out the back of the city there to get away. But that's just one. This is Lachish, and this is one of the things found in the British Museum or whatever that was in Ashurbanipal's place. All right. So then, when you get to Lamentations, anybody know when Lamentations was written? Yeah, in there. That Jeremiah is witnessing what's happening, the horror that's going on, and the siege by the Babylonians, and it was horrific. And we studied Lamentation, I'll remember it, but it was awful. It was just utterly awful. Lamentations is one sad book. And what we're going to look at here is just real quick is the comfort, because we're going to see that word mentioned several times in Lamentations of what's going in this context. It says, she weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she has none to comfort her. Verse 9, this is all in chapter 1. Her uncleanness was in her skirts. She took no thought of her future. And this is talking about Jerusalem. Therefore, her fall is terrible. She has no comforter. Then the last one's here. He says, for these things I weep, my eyes flow with tears, for a comforter is far from me. No, one to revive my spirit. My children are desolate, for the enemy has prevailed. Zion stretches out her hands, but there is none to comfort her. So they were really in a bad place. They heard my groaning, yet there is none to comfort me. So what we get to then in Isaiah chapter 40 now. Okay, so it's now over. They're now, that's all over, but now they're in Babylon, all over the place. And then these words are coming. But these words, they are for them, but they're more for us today, for the people coming in kingdom, because you'll see as we get into it. So, Johnny, would you mind reading this passage here?
Comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her, that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins.
Okay. So you see, now we have another context of comfort, and what God is saying is, and does anybody remember, I said it a long time ago, the King James, this is from the King James, that word comfort in the King, and does anybody remember what that meant in the time of the King, when the King James Bible was written? Anybody ever studied that? But,
Are you saying repent or ease?
no, not along that. Yeah, it's not along that line. Like we think of comfort, and this is another AI thing that came up, but it says when the King James Version was written, comfort had a broader, stronger sense than our modern soothe or console. Okay, It came from the Latin confortare or something like that, meaning to strengthen greatly. In early modern English, the word commonly meant to strengthen, fortify, encourage someone inwardly, to hearten with hope and assurance, to console in sorrow by giving solid grounds for courage. You can see, it's kind of hard to read, but you can see this older sense in other King James passages. But then down the last thing, applied to Isaiah 41, comfort my people. The King James would have been heard as strengthen, hearten, console my people. Not only soothing words, but robust encouragement, grounded in God's declared pardon and forthcoming restoration. So that meant a lot to them. I heard other people say it's like God, it means like God is not only but walking along with you, to strengthen you, to encourage you, that idea. But then, let's see, I'll go here. But then what God did, like there's several things that God does with his people here. Let's see. Do you notice in the first verse there, how much time? Man, I knew we'd get 3 chapters. 3 verses would be lucky to get. But notice like the first verse. Does that strike you, the words I have highlighted? What you're shaking your head. What, you remember something about that?
Not so much memory, it's just, it's set in a tense that's changing. It's switching over as it goes through chapter 40.
Yeah, total. When we saw in earlier chapter, I don't remember, I tried to point it out, but my efforts sometimes are not very good. But God got to the point where he addressed this people, those people. They weren't his people anymore. But now you notice here, my people, your God. I mean, like Art says, it's just a totally different approach here. The idea about the 3 things here, her warfare is ended, okay? And this is talking to us, our iniquity is pardoned, okay? And she has received receiving the Lord's hands double for all her sins. You may have heard that expression. Any idea what that means? Did God actually double the sins on them? I think it's an idiom, but I don't totally understand how that. Maybe somebody else might have a better understanding.
No, I was trying to remember, in the minor prophet stuff going through, where there were pieces where God would call out Israel had more advantages than other nations.
Yeah,
so
that's it.
He's gonna judge you knowing that you had basically more talents, right?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. And it also underscored the thoroughness of the punishment. They were thoroughly punished. Okay. Then we have 8 minutes to look at. There's 3 voices that we're going to see that's pretty neat. And we don't know who they are, or nobody knows who they are, but the 3 voices that cry out. So this one here, Danny, would you mind reading that?
A voice cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up. Every mountain and hill will be made low. And uneven ground shall become level. And the rough places a plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed. And all flesh shall see it together. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken.
It's a neat thing. Y'all heard that passage before, right? Who have you heard quote that before? Say that. John the Baptist, yeah, several times in the Gospels that said. But what is the wilderness? Let me know, what does God mean by the wilderness? Is it a physical, in the wilderness, prepare the way? Is it a physical, and are these valleys literal valleys? Are they literal mountains? Anybody see what he's getting at by saying this?
I kind of see a picture of almost like justice kind of things, right? If something's low, valley.
Very good, Danny. Yeah.
Things like Deuteronomy, we talk about that, where justice isn't just bringing down someone that needs to be punished. It's also about lifting somebody else up who's been wronged,
Yeah.
in a way. I think you kind of see that sort of imagery in this.
Yeah, it's all
Right
spiritual.
or wrongs,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's spiritual context. The high will be lowered. The lowly will be lifted up. I think that's the idea. But Rodney,
You see it in John's message that he came speaking, telling people to repent. It was a change of heart and mind when John, because when it talks about John the Baptist later, that's the very idea is what he was doing. He was lowering the mountains,
It's a great idea, like about what we have to make our path straight, okay? We have to rid ourselves of sin and make our path straight to the God. God doesn't make his path straight to us. We make our path straight, to God. Well,
What you were talking about earlier in verse 2 about, I knew I had dealt with that, because I actually preached on this particular section. That double for her sins literally means it's been balanced out. Like
Okay.
her sins have been balanced out with judgment and punishment, and then God then balances it out, the other way with joy and comfort.
Okay. Very good. Thanks.
Balance on the scale.
Very good. Yeah. All right. Let's see. One of the ideas about the wilderness, okay? We are all in the wilderness. We're in the wilderness. That's what the idea is. When God is not in your life, you're in the wilderness. And so there's a voice crying out for us, to come out of this wilderness. And what happens in the wilderness? It's barren, it's stark, it's bad. And that's the idea. And the scene, like Ezekiel, that Ezekiel was around at that time. And so remember in the first chapter, what did he see? What was, what did he see? I don't know if you can remember that, but what did God do in Ezekiel 1 that was so telling,
Is it the vision of the
Leaving the temple, yeah, they show God coming out and then coming out over the city. And God has left. And when God leaves our lives or leaves that city, then chaos ensues. There's bad things going to happen. And that's the idea here that when the Babylonians came and took all the people, Jerusalem or Judah and Palestine, it was a wilderness. And so that's why it's so significant when they would see John the Baptist out in the wilderness. Behold, a voice crying out in the wilderness. People who were students of the Bible, they would know this is something significant because that's what the scripture talks about. Let's see. Of course, I think I had that where John was preaching that, and we're almost out of time. And the other thing, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed. That's a great thing there. And does anybody know where that was fulfilled? See that in John? Does anybody remember the passage about that? Where it says, yeah, you remember, Rodney? Yeah, behold, and Word became flesh, dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. Glory is of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him, cried out, this was he whom I said, he who comes after me ranks before me because he was before me. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God the only Son who is at the Father's hand. So what's neat about that is that this is like showing it's to us. It's to this kingdom that's come, and that's when all this is fulfilled and fully seen. Okay, and then we got 2 minutes here, so let's see. This second voice that we don't, it says, okay, Rodney, would you mind reading that real quick?
A voice says, cry, and I said, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. Grass withers, the flower fades, when the breath of the Lord blows on it. Surely the people are grass. Grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of the Lord, the word of our gods, will stand forever.
You see the point, or do you see a contrast here? Why is this passage put in here? What does this say to you? You've seen this before too. Peter explains it to us, what it is. But what contrast do you see here?
Physical things will pass away. Spiritual things
Yes.
of God will last forever.
Yes, if only humans would see, if only humans would come to this realization, that we're so finite, and so we're gonna pass away. But the one thing that does stand is God's word. And then, of course, and we're out of time, but and then in Peter, we see that he tells that, he quotes this passage, and what we, he talks about that having purified your souls for your obedience to the truth, for a sincere brotherly love one another earnestly from a pure heart, since you have been born again, not of perishable seed, but of imperishable. It's just a guarantee with God. We got not in this flesh. It's like he says, we need to wake up. It's gonna burn. And that news, this news, is the good news that was preached to us. So, all right, so we'll pick up there, and we'll really get rolling on the next class then. Okay. Get this stuff.